Don't miss your chance to win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone. Next week, you win tickets to see the Black Crows at Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on August 13th. Listen to the KSL Sports Zone all day Wednesday for your chance to win. DJ PK, and we're joined by Josh Furlong covering the Utes for KSL Sports. He was up on the hill with PK and I at a cast of thousands as the Utes opened practice yesterday. The first of the, why is it fall camp, Josh? Isn't it summer camp? I mean, it's August.
I know. It's always my favorite. It's like we're fall camp, and sometimes it gets into July, and it's, we're like, cool. I don't feel it's 104 degrees, and it's fall camp. But you know what? We're going to still go with it.
Don't you see the leaves changing in about 2 months?
Oh, yeah. That crisp air. That crisp air that's blowing in your face.
If they practice at 4 a.m, maybe.
I was relieved. I was so relieved of the early practice because where they have a stand on the field against the concrete wall, it literally becomes 10 or 15 degrees hotter than whatever the day is. And you can cook over there. It was in the shade. It was awesome.
I usually lose. I don't actually practice during fall camp, but I usually lose about 7 pounds.
Yeah, standing around waiting for you to come over and talk. That'll do it. Put you there in the microwave.
Sort of what you would expect out of the first day, all sorts of optimism. And you can go across the country, Josh, and that's basically what you're going to get after day one.
Yeah, the first week-ish, I mean, it's all optimism, right? It's like it's an extension of media days where everybody's happy, everybody's done all the hard work to get there. But you know what? I think to me, I think there is just a little bit of a different vibe. Not that there was a bad vibe with Kyle Whittingham, right? I just think it's different, and I think that's an interesting side of this, of where Utah is now trying to live in a new era of Morgan Scalley, right? And there's some energy, some optimism about where they're headed. But you could tell in Morgan's voice that there's still plenty of things that he's stressed about, right? Like there's a lot of things that he wants to see improved and ready. The question he has the questions that we all have. Like he doesn't know yet because they don't have pads on. One of the biggest questions obviously is going to be offensive line, and he can't see that yet because there's no pads, and they don't understand how they're really going to gel together when somebody's coming at them at 100 miles an hour. So, I think there's excitement and optimism, but until those pads come on and they start hitting, there's going to be some questions still to be had about this team.
I think that's true, but I think you can draw it out. There's questions until the first game, and given the nature of the first game, there's questions until they play Arkansas. And then depending on how Arkansas looks, there can still be questions into the Big 12.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was, going into that, going into that 2024 season, they looked decent. Everything was going well, and then suddenly it fell apart, and it was really tough. So, you don't really know what you have until you get a few games in. I mean, I remember Kyle talking about it all the time about being, 5 games in until you really understand what you have. And I think, especially with the questions that Utah has this year on the offensive line, you're not really going to know until those week 4, week 5. There are different tests in those first 3 weeks. I mean, you do get an easier opponent and an FCS opponent in Idaho. You do go jump up into the SEC, and then you get Utah State. So you're going to get a wide range of opponents. But I'm curious to see, does that offensive line gel immediately, and do they come out there, looking great against Idaho? Or is this one of those games where everybody's excited to be in Rice-Eccles Stadium and you leave kind of disappointed because of the product that was put out there because things didn't work? I think that's really where the test is. But I believe that they feel like they've got what they need to, that they're going to be okay. It's not just going to be a sieve back there and everything's going to come back to Devin Dampier. But, I think that's going to be the biggest question, and then trying to see if these wide receivers really live up to the hype that they've built.
Last December was a month unlike anything that we've experienced in this town, at least since the 3 decades that I've been here. It starts off with Kalani to where assistants thought, we're out of here. We are leaving. We are going to Penn State, and Jay Hill's going to take over. Well, we know what happened there. And then it ends with, well, Jay Hill did leave. and he was the one to leave, and everybody thought that he was going to be the next head coach if Kalani left at BYU, right? And then you have stuff that comes out after the fact, and you were all over it, as far as information and the U of U's Mark Harlan saying he's disappointed it wasn't the smooth transition that was promised. We all remember that. Well, as I look at it, and just being up there, for day one and talking to Morgan down in Texas, you were there, I talked to you down there, that actually, the way it played out in terms of Kyle leaving and then taking a lot of assistance might actually be a good thing. And here's where I'm going with this and get your thought on it, is that now all these guys, these newcomers, they are essentially an employee of Morgan Scalley. It's not, I was a coworker of Morgan Scalley's, now he's my boss. You don't have to worry about that. He hired a lot of these coaches, and then he promotes Colton Swan, and then obviously somebody like an Atawaya and Sharif Shaw got different job titles. So in a sense, it allows Morgan, not completely, but certainly probably, I guess go certainly probably, it doesn't make sense. So I'll eliminate the probably. I'll say certainly that it would have been different if Kyle had just retired, because all those coaches wouldn't have left with him, and then Morgan would have had guys that, they wouldn't have the fresh start. Now with all these new dudes up there, he does have a fresh start. So in my mind, that might be more beneficial for the development of Morgan Scalley as a head coach.
And I absolutely agree with that. That's something that I've been saying all along is, after you take a step back and all the frustrations that were had, this is a phenomenal opportunity for Morgan Scalley. One, I truly believe that Kyle would have stepped back and he wouldn't have been influencing Morgan Scalley and what he does, right? Like if he was that advisor or whatever the role was to the athletic director, I truly believe he'd let Morgan be Morgan. But there's always kind of that Nick Saban-esque attitude of like, he's hovering around the program. He's going to look, is he approving of what's going on? And that's always there. I think in this version, Morgan gets to be Morgan, right? He gets to hire his own staff. He doesn't have to leave a bunch of the holdovers. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those coaches he wanted. So it's not like, he didn't want him. But I think this is a great opportunity for him to really kind of get as much of a fresh start as he possibly can. It's either going to succeed or it's going to fail with him. And that's the way it should be, right? He shouldn't have somebody looking over his shoulder. Even if it's not really that way, it now allows him to be able to have that opportunity to be able to move forward in his own path. There's nobody standing in the way. Kyle Whittingham's focused on his own stuff. You've got all those other coaches that are focused on their other stuff. And sure, there is some holdover, like you said, Colton Swan, Sharif Shaw, Mark Atawaya, those types of coaches that are there, but you at least have a staff that is Morgan Scalley's staff. He got rid of the strength and conditioning coach and switched it up. There's a lot of different things that allow him to be able to make this his staff. And I think that's a really important thing for him in his first year, because now he doesn't feel like he's just inheriting Kyle Whittingham's, operation. This is Morgan Scalley's operation, and he gets to do it the way that he wants to, which is, I think, very important.
Man, you two I got like 10 things I want to ask you right now, Josh. So I just gotta pick one. Let's start with one thing that did not work well under Kyle. Almost everything did. Kyle had a great run, but it was not a perfect run. And if there's one thing I always look at and always underperformed, and PK got sick of me saying it, wide receivers. They're not good enough. They should be better. And at one point when we were talking, I'm like, why don't they at least go out as the transfers became popular and like get the best guys out of the Mountain West? Mountain West football is actually pretty good. They send people to the NFL. When he needed a coordinator and he went to New Mexico, and he needed a quarterback and he went to New Mexico, paid off, jackpot. Mountain West football is pretty good. So now you got Morgan coming in, and there's some areas where there's no way he's going to match what Kyle does. But to me, there's also areas where he can surpass what Kyle does. And the number one thing I would say is the wide receiver group. It's got to be better. It's just, I don't even think it's been C- most years in the Pac-12 era. If you go all the way back to the Sugar Bowl, it was pretty good. But you got to go back a long way. Do you think with some of these Mountain West transfers that the wide receivers are actually going to be an asset to the offense as opposed to the group where you look at them and think, I hope they block for some downfield runs and don't mess it up?
No, I completely agree. And I think that was one of the biggest knocks, right? Like, it's not like Kyle Whittingham didn't try to get high-end talent, but I think with so many years of experience of just saying, look, I'm going to run the ball down your throat, essentially, right? Like, obviously he threw the ball, but because of that, I think it limited a lot of their potential. Yes, they had star tight ends, and that was a phenomenal opportunity. That was kind of the weird subtangent of that, where wide receiver was not solid most of the time, but what tight end, they
great.
found a gold mine there, right?
Yeah.
So like there was successes, but for whatever reason, he could not get wide receivers. And so I think this year, I think there's at least an attempt to, in the sense that it's not like Utah's just going to say, okay, we're going to throw it all the time, right? There's no, Kyle would always talk about, I want balance. I want like a 50-50 balance of passing and throwing. And everybody kind of like nod their head like, sure, okay. But I think what Morgan is trying to do is he wants to spread the ball around to as many people as possible. So it may still have a lot of run elements, especially if that offensive line can hold up. But there's going to be a lot of attempts to be able to start passing. And I think with Kevin McGivern, there's more of an emphasis to start passing because he understands that relaxes a little bit of the run game. And so I think there's going to be a nice little balance there. Obviously, it has to work out with these guys. They have to catch the ball. They have to be in sync with Devin Dampier. They've got to be able to do the right things. But I don't think you're going to get an emphasis on, okay, wide receivers, you're here to block. Every wide receiver knows that they have to block. I'm teaching my 12-year-old that when he's lined up as a wide receiver, he has to block as well. But I think there's a different attitude here where they want to throw the ball. They want to mix it up. Morgan wants to be more aggressive that way and not just maintain the status quo. He's younger, so he understands kind of the evolution of this game a little bit and understanding kind of how that's gone. But I think he wants his new wrinkles to it as well, where it's just, we want to spread the ball around and not just create this hot hand. I mean, if the hot hand works, it's great, but not just this one hand where you're just going to dump it off to, Ryan Davis last year. All it is, you're going to get a 5-yard out route or a 5-yard, whatever, dig route, whatever. You're going to get something that is going to be, dynamic. It's going to have a lot of variations, and it's going to allow them to be able to spread the field. So once again, proof is in the pudding, right? We got to see it, but I think there's at least going to be much more of an effort there. You're going to see Morgan Scalley trying to push the effort a little bit more to try to spread that ball around and at least make everybody an asset of the game, including the running backs who he wants to make part of that receiving game as well.
Tell us about the story that you did. He gave you access. I assume you asked him, and he said yes. And then, or at least somebody asked him. You maybe asked the sports information people, and they relayed it to him. I've read the story. Get inside because you're there sitting in their meetings in his office and whatnot. Just give us a highlight of that.
Yeah, honestly, it was a really cool opportunity. I mean, it's such a rare opportunity for many coaches to do it. Obviously, Kyle kept things pretty close to the vest. It's not that Morgan doesn't either, but I think especially in this first year, it was an opportunity to kind of showcase how he operates, right? And then, like, at the end of the day, many people are going to look at this and it's still an in-house office job, right? You come in there, you go to several meetings, you're doing a lot of stuff. So like that side of it, many people are going to find as boring, but there's a lot of the little nuances how you saw Morgan kind of operate, right? He's very much into wanting to create a culture, and it's not that him just saying it, right? Like he very much so is trying to build that culture within that program and trying to live it and try to hold people accountable to it. But it was cool to kind of see the operation of how he was able to enforce that and trying to get the guys to kind of buy in. And there's a lot of positivity and excitement about that, right? Even in staff meetings, there's a lot of buy-in and excitement towards the directions that Morgan wants. Now, look, it's not like everybody's standing up and clapping after everything Morgan says, right? Like we get that. It's a meeting. But like, I think it's kind of the direction that he's taking things, right? It's he wants to build a personal touch where, the third string, running back feels the same as the starting running back or the quarterback, right? There's a personal connection with Morgan Scalley himself. It's not just the coaching staff, it's himself. He wants to be able to make himself accessible. He wants to be able to make his coaches accessible while also kind of preaching this opportunity of saying, hey, like if you feel like there's ways to do Utah better, let's talk. You have to have evidence of it. You've got to be able to support that evidence. But I think there's a lot of that. He wants to support these athletes every possible way that he can. And that was definitely shown in all the meetings that he took part in. There's a lot of, recruiting meetings. There's different meetings to help him become a better head coach, right? And different people on staff presenting him ideas. So, it's hard to wrap all that day into one, but I think that's the overarching theme is he wants to create a personal touch in a business that's very transactional. And I think that's a hard balance to make, but you're seeing that. The fact that he showed up to the airport to pick up Devin Dampier after his surgery is that little touch that kind of goes to show who Morgan Scalley is. Yes, Devin Dampier is a star quarterback, and obviously you're going to take care of that guy. But the fact that you can go out of your way to do these things, that's the little things that these players are talking about. That's kind of, the player's coach is what a lot of people will say. That's how Morgan is approaching it. And I think that's just the little subtle differences that Kyle operated in.
Josh Furlong covering the Utes for KSL Sports. I want to flip one of my earlier comments here because I think this is so important for Morgan. And the farther he can kick the can down the road, the better, obviously. But one of Kyle's great strengths was when things got wrong, they often got fixed quickly. And after losses, there were bounce backs. Now, we can all point to, multiple quarterback injuries and a 7-game losing streak a couple years ago. Sure, there are examples where things didn't get fixed. But those Rose Bowl teams both lost 4 times. And one of them was the Rose Bowl, so you don't bounce back. That's the end of the year. But to have 3 losses along the way and still find a way to get to the conference title game and win it and get to the Rose Bowl, Kyle's teams were always resilient. And you can say it quickly and it sounds easy. I've rooted for a lot of San Diego teams that had 0 resilience. So I'm really curious, where does that come from? Do Morgan teams have that quality? You don't really want to find out because you want the team to go 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. What do you think, and what signs have you seen that maybe give you a hint, or maybe you don't know and you're just waiting to see for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't ultimately know, right? Especially as the head coach. But I think there's many elements of him as a defensive coordinator that showcase that. And one of the most important, I would say, is probably that 2024 season. That defense could have locked it up and said, you know what, we're done. We're tired of trying to win games for you guys. You can't even go score 10 points. You can't score 14 points. We're doing everything we can to help you. There's so many games that way where Utah literally scored 2 touchdowns and they win those games, and Utah couldn't do it. That defense, talking to Morgan, he said that season was probably one of his favorite seasons as a defensive coordinator, just to watch those defenders, because they never gave up. From the first game to the last game, they continued to give their all to that team. And I think, to me, that culture of the RSNB, right? Like, you're going to hear that a ton with him, and you heard it a ton on the defensive side. And he's adopting that a little bit to the offensive side of the ball, and kind of that mindset that, like, you just are always resilient. You're moving, you're doing all these things to help. That's got to translate to the offensive side of the ball. But I think if there's any elements there was the 24 season, some other seasons where that defense, they continued, right? They continued to fight for each other, and they continued to do what they needed to the very end. I mean, there were several games Morgan talked about the offense not living it up and the defense just continually fighting. I think that is the mindset and the approach that Morgan Scalley takes to this team, right? At the end of the day, you have to see it. You have to believe it. There's got to be a connection with this team. The offensive side was clearly fractured. They didn't have a lot of great success. And I don't know that they were incredibly resilient on that side, but the defensive side was. And I think that's that culture that he's bringing into it, of saying, look, you fight to the bitter end, even if things aren't going well for you. He builds that connection. There's a lot of camaraderie there. And as long as that can translate to the entirety of the team, and that team is connected, which I think this team is, there can be a lot of resilience there. There can be a lot of that fighting through it, even if this season isn't the dream season that everybody expects, where, hey, Utah's a playoff team and Morgan Scalley's first season. I think there's going to be some fight there. But until we see it on the field, I mean, it's really hard to know. But I do believe that Morgan is building something like that. And that's probably the most recent example of something of that caliber.
Josh, thanks for a few minutes. We appreciate it. We'll see you up on the hill covering the Utes all year long, and people can follow you at KSL Sports and on social media for all the latest from the U. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Josh Furlong, join us. You can follow him. Go to KSLSports.com for all his work. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Kurt Schmid, Real Salt Lake's chief soccer officer, joins us. RSL and Tigres tonight as Leagues Cup kicks off. That's next. Stay with us right here on The Zone. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Real Salt Lake facing Tigres tonight, the first of 3 games in group play in the Leagues Cup. 8 o'clock at America First Field tonight. We're joined right now by Kurt Schmid, Real Salt Lake's chief soccer officer. Kurt, good morning. Welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Thanks.
Kurt, before we talk about Tigres, let's talk about RSL. It sounds like you're getting at least a few guys back. That was a pretty shorthanded club you were running out there, but it seems like the arrow's up a little bit, at least for a couple guys.
Yeah, we're getting a few guys back healthy. We're still missing a few, but we're testing the depth and the next guy up, and they got to step in and perform at this point.
Yeah, I think you would be testing the depth even if you had everybody, right? Because you got a whole bunch of games. Trey Fitzgerald the other day was telling me all the games in such a short span of time, which automatically tests the depth.
Yeah, and there's certainly some rotation there, and that impacted some of the lineup decisions on the weekend as well, given the short turnaround to today for the Leagues Cup. So, we're trying to make sure we keep guys fresh and healthy as much as possible and put out as strong a lineup as we can for each game.
Correct me if I'm wrong about the dates, but I think you got about a month left in the transfer window here. And I'm curious, as you go through the depth, partly because you're rotating, partly because injuries are forcing you, how much this is helping you make roster decisions for now and for whatever you'll do in the winter. Is this, I don't know if I should characterize it as midterms or finals, but either way, for a lot of players, this is a pretty important stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it certainly gives guys, a lot of guys chances that they might not otherwise have, right? And you see some guys step in, whether that's, guys like Zach Booth, guys like, Juan Arias, who we just, ended up bringing in on a permanent deal. Phil Quinn stepped in and done well. We've seen Sava Lobjanidze come in and add some minutes off the bench. So, it's really an opportunity for those guys to come in and show what they can do. And like you said, whether that's decisions for now or really more for the younger guys, decisions for the future and how we see them penciling in down the road, I think those are important opportunities.
Speaking of the younger guys, how does Gozo compare to some of the younger guys that you've had over the years?
I mean, Gozo very favorably, and I think one key area, which is the adaptability he's shown every time he's been challenged and tested and stretched at a new level, his ability to grow to meet that challenge and his capacity to do that in a repeated sense has been really, really good. And that's sort of an intangible element that every, talented young player that's going to, progress needs to have. Obviously, physically he's got some abilities that are special in terms of his high intensity capacity and his speed and his acceleration, those things. And, he's got something else that is, difficult to teach, which is just, having that nose for the goal. He has a bit of a single-mindedness about him that, every time he gets the ball, for better or worse, he thinks about how he can try and score a goal. And I think there's times when that can be frustrating, certainly with young players. But I think there's an element of danger to that draws, and attracts attention, which not only lets him create for himself with his abilities, but also creates some space for others and lets them have opportunities that they might not otherwise have.
The Jazz hit somewhat unexpectedly on a good young player. It was probably 20 years ago now. And I remember hearing trade rumors, and I remember asking somebody in the organization who had a role kind of like you, and he laughed. He says, "Oh, yeah, we're getting calls all the time. And they're all ridiculous. Everybody's trying to rip me off like I'm stupid. We're not trading that guy for 2 second-round picks. There's nothing serious." And I'm wondering, in the world of soccer, there's so many players and so many clubs. In the NBA, there's 30, so there's time to do the dance because you're really only talking to 29 other clubs. Is there that kind of time in soccer? The offers that come in for these guys, I mean, we hear the speculation about Luna and Gozo and whoever else moving. Do you get real bit, or do you feel like sometimes people are wasting your time trying to rip you off? And yeah, they're talks, but it's ridiculous and they're not serious. I'm wondering how much of that you have to put up with.
Yeah, I think it's also a different animal from the standpoint of the ecosystem and the ecosystem in our sport is so huge, and our place in it is so much different than it is in basketball, let's say, right? So I think in basketball you've got a good young player, and there's every reason to believe that you can hold on to that player and he can become a career franchise player. I think in MLS it's obviously a tougher task to do that. I think it's possible, and this club especially has had some players become club legends and stay here for a long time. But I think a lot of really talented, young players, they do have a dream to test themselves, in Europe, in the Champions League or the Premier League or, La Liga or what have you. And so there's always going to be that impetus where, that you are likely going to have to make this decision at some point, and they are going to go. And so really it's a question of timing and like you said, price. And so, yeah, I think there's still a lot of teams that are looking at MLS as a bargain league, and, some prominent transfers recently have contributed to that situation. Alex Freeman being one, Obed Vargas being another, Sebastian Berhalter, who just moved to Middlesbrough. I think there's been some contractual situations that have driven sort of lower price points on those guys, and that's maybe driving a false narrative about MLS players. But so it's you get a lot of interest and calls of teams that aren't likely to meet a valuation or evaluation of him. But those don't last long. But there's enough serious interest, in him as well that there can be some serious conversations about what that value is and when it's likely to be met.
A lot of times, even in college level now, certainly at the pro level, when you ask about a team, and they'll tell you that it's down the schedule. We're just focused on whatever. Like in college football now, we want to ask about BYU plays Notre Dame, but they'll tell you, they're focused on Utah Tech. Okay, you're going to kill Utah Tech, but nevertheless, that's the standard pat answer that you get. How did you guys handle the scouting with the team in this situation with the game you have now versus the other stuff? Because it seemed like it would be if you didn't get a head start on it, it'd be a quick turnaround to try to get as much information as you could, basically. Less than 72 hours later, getting back out on the field?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think from a mental standpoint, we keep the players focused on the next match. And I think, especially in this situation, given their two different competitions, I think the focus of the players was certainly on the league match on Saturday. And now it shifts afterwards to Tuesday, to today. But the staff has a really good division of labor where they sort of, they sort of alternate and step past each other. And while one guy's preparing for the next game, the other one already starts on the game after that, and then they sort of rotate. And so I think from a coaching staff and a staff preparation standpoint, there's a really good rotation and division of labor that makes sure we get all the work done, even on short turnarounds. But, Pablo's job and our job is obviously to keep the players focused on performing in the next game to their highest level and not to look past them and be focused on another one. And I think that's been successful so far.
Historically, Tigres is awesome, and they have a massive fan base. They've won lots of league championships. They were in a Club World Cup final a few years ago, which was a big deal because nobody from this part of the world gets to do that, and they pulled it off. But this season is going poorly for them. They've lost 2 of their first 3. They've only got 1 point. They've given up 8 goals in 3 games. That's a large number right there. What opportunity is there for RSL to attack? What have you seen from them defensively that they've given up 8 goals in 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, look, they certainly have an older goalkeeper. He's still performing well, or at least has been, and but there's no denying that could catch up at any time. But look, I think these types of games are different competition. I think there are opportunities for a team, if a team's in poor form in the league like that, it gives them a fresh start and a reset. And so, we can't really worry about whatever they're doing in Liga MX. That kind of has no bearing on whatever they're going to do tonight, because, they'll look at it as a fresh start and say, like, look, that's the league. This is a tournament. Let's go win this tournament. And we're all on a level playing field now. So I think they're going to come out. They're obviously loaded with talent. No matter, who they put out there, be, first 11, mix, second 11, whatever they want to put out there, they have a ton of talent, a ton of resources at their disposal. And so we know that it's a tough game. It's going to be dangerous, but it's also a different style of play, from MLS games. And it's a little more possession based and maybe a little less transitional, or can be less transitional at times, although sometimes these games can open up a bit. But so that'll be a challenge on our guys' front, and they're not as familiar with us and us with them. So there's going to be parts of the opening minutes of this game where both teams are feeling each other out a little bit and trying to see where the weaknesses are. So it's going to be entertaining from that standpoint. But yeah, I think you throw form out the window when you start a new competition like this.
How much more money do teams from Mexico have than MLS teams? What is the financial gap like these days? Or in some cases with some clubs, has it been closed? Because obviously in both leagues, there's probably some payroll disparity.
Yeah, I would think actually it's a nuanced answer. I think if you look at sort of a median club in each league, I actually think MLS is either on an even playing field or maybe even a bit ahead of sort of the median in Liga MX. But when you look at the top end of Liga MX and the giants in that league and the historical big money clubs and powerhouses, they are spending on a different level than the vast majority of our leagues. I think there is a lot made of the spending disparity within MLS, and obviously, there are moments when clubs like Miami, or in the past it's been LA, have really outstripped the rest of the league. But for the most part, in relation to other leagues in the world, our league from top to bottom has a pretty tight spread, whereas most other leagues have a pretty big disparity from top to bottom. And so I think Liga MX is similar in that respect, where, I think, and you've seen this in League Cup in the past, is when, outside of those top clubs, I think MLS has been very competitive and come out ahead a lot against some of the mid and lower tier Liga MX clubs. But the top end is still really difficult to compete with. They stockpile a ton of talent. They can essentially field a team of 11 DPs, and obviously we're limited in what we can do there. And, they're not, from a financial standpoint. If they have the money, they can spend it, whether that's a center forward or a center back or a goalkeeper or whatever it can be. So, it's always a challenge there to compete with them on a financial level. But I think there's ways to try to make up some of that ground on the field and with some of the player development that we work on here in our league.
Last thing before we let you go here, who does Tigres look like in Major League Soccer? And maybe it's a composition of a couple different teams, the way they defend and attack. Are there any comparisons?
No, nobody.
Okay.
I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a different style. And so it's not really, from at least from our player standpoint, it's not super useful to say it's just like, whatever, like, our last few games, just like LAC or it's just like Portland or anything like that. I think it's just a different style, and, it's something that you have to sort of play these teams over almost a period of years and almost build up like an institutional knowledge of playing against sort of, Mexican and Central and South American teams.
Kurt, good luck tonight. Good luck in the Leagues Cup, and thanks for coming on the show for a few minutes.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
All right, Kurt Schmid, Real Salt Lake's Chief Soccer Officer, joining us right here on The Zone.
I got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
He said Gozo has a nose for the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really a question. I'm going to gift you this.
Okay.
So you can go with Nozo, Gozo.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Use it.
A little rhyme?
Yeah. He's Nozo, Gozo.
Gozo, Nozo, how to score.
If you got a nose for the ball.
Nozo, Gozo.
And you hear that.
Does.
He's got a knack for rebounding.
Mm-hmm.
He's got whatever. You hear that.
No, absolutely.
And when you hear that, it's something that it's hard to really put into words as far as a definition, but you know what that means. And that's good for this youngster to be able to have someone who has been around the game for a long time to be able to say that, whatever that might be. He has a whatever for whatever in whatever sport you're saying it. It's usually a high compliment.
Yes, and it is a compliment, and he definitely has it. He's scored a couple goals this year that you always talk about this, and it's so true. It's what MLS is really trying to capitalize on. It's you go with friends. It's a good summer night. You like sports. You kind of like it, but you're not that into it and all that. But you want that moment where someone does something. You said this about goals. Not all, but a lot of goals are real. Like there's a skill check in there that just makes you say, wow,
Hardcore.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember who it was. Yock, maybe you remember. It was a home game, and RSL, it was a day game. It was early in the year. And they were scoring in the north end. And he got the ball kind of at the top of the 18-yard box, and he took a poor touch, and the ball popped up on him. And it's like he volleyed to himself, and he turned as kind of a sidewinder, and he just lashed it into the back of the net, right?
Lash.
The place erupted.
As they should.
It was the skill check you talk about. Like, there's a level of skill there.
Few folks can do that.
You know enough about sports, even if you're not hardcore soccer, you're like, well, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And asked about it afterwards, he's like, did you mean to do that, or did it just happened and you reacted? And he has enough confidence in himself. He goes, yeah, that was a bad touch. I made a mess of that ball. I had to do something with it, so I gave that a shot. I mean, he just like, Like, that is not what most players are going to think or do, and it's not what they're going to say later to admit, yeah, I screwed that up. But then, no problem, you know? I mean, it's a little bit like a home run hitter. You love your baseball analogy. It's like a home run hitter, like, you fooled a little bit. You shouldn't have swung at that pitch. It's dropping out of the strike zone, but you go down and get it, and then you hit it out of the park. It's like most people can't.
Golf it out.
Most people can't do that, but some people can't.
Freddie Freeman said the other day, he said he will compliment guys on hits when they get to first base, and he'll have a little interaction with them, and he'll say, "Hey, that was pretty sweet." And somebody asked him, "Why do you do that? You know, that's you shouldn't be doing that." He said, "Yeah, I appreciate great plays, and to get a hit off a major league pitcher is a hard thing to do."
It's this kind of same thing that Andrew Luck did when he was playing quarterback in the NFL. Guys would sack him and be like, "That was a great play, dude," and they'd kind of be like, "What are you doing, bro?"
I don't have any problem with that.
I think it's great.
The late, great Steve Klauke. And I was talking to him one night before a Jazz game, and I'm like, I've been doing this a long time, Steve. Like, how have things changed? And he goes, there's way more than negative. There's now so much of how this person failed and that person messed up. He says, like, people, like, it's like you can't back into a championship. And we got to this high level. It's not about what somebody does well. It's about what somebody does poorly. And one thing you said about Hot Rod, the thing you appreciate about Hot Rod, and I've always tried to remember this, is like Hot Rod, if the opposing team made some great play, like Hot Rod got excited.
Yeah.
Because there aren't many people who can do that. It's hard to do. And if you love the sport, you should appreciate any time you see that sport, whatever it is, played at a really high level. So I love that Freeman does that.
Yeah.
Because there are times you're like, I mean, have you ever gone into a batting cage? I remember once when I was a kid, and I could probably hit like, I don't even know how old I was, but I could probably hit in like a 60-mile-an-hour cage.
18?
I was in my 20s. And we put the cage, I was there with a couple friends, and we put the cage on, I put it on 80, and another kid put it on 90. And we were young. And we were laughing out of the cage like, whoa, that's going to dent the chain link, man. We cannot be doing that. I don't know what we were, like 12 or whatever. I don't even know. And so now a major league pitcher with major league command and the way they can make a ball break and you get a hit, he's right. That's a hard thing to do. And Gozo has a couple of those goals this year where it's like, well, not everybody can do that. So, but I just don't know how serious the offers are. I mean, they really value him. But at some point, what Kurt was alluding to here is if a player really wants to go, well, then they just don't sign their next contract. And when it's up, they can go and you get nothing for them. So at some point, even if you think they're worth $5 million, you might have to take 2. Or if you think they're worth 10, you might have to take 6 because you're running out of time on their contract. And Gozo definitely wants to go. I mean, he wants to test himself. So it's going to happen at some point. The question is when. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. More in a moment. Bob Nightingale's got baseball fans fired up. We got more college football on the way. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Just had on Josh Furlong. You want to hear about the Utes? We had a long conversation with him. And tonight, RSL is playing Tigres, League's Cup opener. We just talked with Kurt Schmid. Both those interviews will be posted, KSLSports.com, the KSL Sports app. You can get them wherever you get your podcasts. You go to YouTube, wherever, and check those out. Also, earlier this morning, we were talking baseball. And PK, the overwhelming, I was surprised at how many comments this got. It goes back to the, I don't know why I'm a political science major in college doing sports talk, but there's this thing you get taught early on in political science classes, all politics is local. So is sports. I mean, the amount of passion for hockey in this town, now that we have a team and we have a dog in the hunt, it's skyrocketed. And baseball, it's going to be the same thing, and I think to an even larger extent. Even more. Hockey happens at a time of year the calendar's congested. There's a lot going on. Whereas baseball is going to have a lot of nights where it's the only game. I mean, it overlaps a little bit with soccer, although that schedule's changing. Obviously, it overlaps with the playoffs for hockey and basketball. But there's going to be a lot of nights. We get baseball. It's going to be the only thing going on. USA Today baseball writer Bob Nightingale says Salt Lake City is a lock to get an MLB expansion team. How sweet is that? And I was surprised at the outpouring. Looks like almost 40 comments. People are fired up for something that is still, according to Bob, 5 or 6 years away.
Yeah, I always thought that this was an underdeveloped baseball market, an underappreciated baseball market, that there would be a lot of baseball fans here who would be excited. And then people just want to go and they're looking for entertainment. Mm-hmm. They're looking for something to do. You know, in the summer, we sit out on our porch or we stand on the curb and we yak with the neighbors, right? And that's fun to do in the summer because you can't do it for most of the season or the year, and in the summer you can. And so that gives the casual, I think the baseball might have the most casual fans that there are because you can go, and I always like to look when I'm watching a game, the people that you can see, who's paying attention and who's talking.
Yeah.
You know?
I do know.
Now, in the playoff, that's a different story. Everybody's every pitch, blah, blah, blah. But in regular season,
but some rando game in June. Yeah.
And they're chatting. You're having an evening, and you can't go to a movie and do that. You got to be quiet. Baseball, you can. And then you got the hardcore, so they have a lot of folks there that can get cover from both sides.
Right.
The casual and just to be outside. And the view here is going to be spectacular. Every freaking stadium, every football stadium, we don't have a big baseball stadium yet, or obviously.
But the colleges have it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
And the Bees,
right.
They've all have great views, spectacular.
Yeah. And in pro baseball, you have to face east, at least the easterly direction. Yeah. So you're going to get the mountains.
Right.
And for some of that, you're going to get snow-capped mountains. And there's nobody else that has that. There's literally no one else who has that because Colorado's the other way.
So you're in 30 minutes early, and batting practice is over, and they're dragging the infield, and you can just gawk at the mountains.
And the views are going to be spectacular.
Yes.
I went to a baseball game for Utah at their new stadium this year. Spectacular.
I was curious about that because the trees, because Sunnyside Park is right there, and I was wondering if the trees blocked the view or not. But did you look straight to Mount Olympus?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. BYU baseball is very disciplined about this. They almost never send out, on social media, they'll put a photo announce a game or a final score or whatever. They almost never put anything out that just doesn't have an awesome view.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could just turn around and, have a play at first base or something, but they don't mess with that.
A lot of the schools had they've had it remodeled in the Canyons District and other places. And so at Brighton, the school looks nothing like it used to.
Right.
Because of the space, I guess, they flipped the softball and the baseball fields because softball needs fewer acreage, right? Mm-hmm. And the baseball field now faces completely east.
Oh, really? Because
it
used to face west.
Nope.
Yeah. So now they've got the view.
You will have snow cap.
Absolutely.
During their season.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a community changer of the highest level, I really believe.
And we won't have an off-season to sports.
That also,
it will be non-stop. And I got to say, depending on where you live, it's a little shocking. Growing up in San Diego, when we didn't have the NBA and we didn't have the NHL, like January and February could get slow. If the Chargers stunk, even if the season wasn't over, it was over in November. And it could be pretty slow until spring training got going. And then you move here, and summer was a different beast, and it was great because it was a great time to go on vacation, all that. But it was still weird. The rhythm of life was just, it was the first time I hadn't lived somewhere where baseball wasn't a big deal. But I think you're right about the underrated market. And one night that drove that home, Steven Strasburg was a huge prospect at San Diego State before he went off to the major leagues, and unfortunately had some injuries, but he's still really good. And he pitched, and the Utes couldn't play at the ballpark because the Bees were home, so they moved the game up to the Raptors field at Lindquist Field. And the number of people streaming into that park and wearing gear from major league teams all over the place and high schools all over the place. People went a long way to see that. They made an effort, and it was a healthy crowd that showed up for that. And just shows you a sign of, things to come. According to Bob Nightingale, 2031 or 2032 for the start of play, 2029 for the clubs to officially be awarded. All right, DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. More football in a minute. Stay with us.